Hello, my name is Mona Fastvold, and I am the director, writer, and producer of The Testament of Abry.
As a woman, I'm a mother Anne.
I have seen a chosen people waiting for us in America.
I was actually doing research for The World to Come. That takes place in upstate New York, and I was looking for a hymn, and I found this beautiful hymn called Pretty Mother's Home. It was written by a woman. Her name was Patsy Williams, and she was a freed slave, it turned out, and she was a songwriter and became a prominent figure within the Shaker community. I didn't know much about them. All I knew about the Shakers was really their wonderful, furniture design and these gorgeous boxes and chairs, and I didn't really know more about it. So then upon doing further research on that hymn, I started reading more about the Shakers, and I realized it was a religion that was led by a woman, which is very unusual in the 1700s. They lived with complete equality between gender and race and social economical equality. Reading about this very strange utopian community, at the height of it, it was over 6,000 followers, who all also gave up sex. They were celibate. So I thought, wow, how in the world did they manage to convince 6,000 people to give up sex? Could it be just because they all wanted to live in equality? But it turns out they also worship through ecstatic song and dance. I think these prayer meetings that they had, they almost functioned like modern therapy in many ways. Like you would confess all your deepest, darkest sins and feelings, and then you would dance and shake and, get it all out of your body and be forgiven and loved. Well, I think one of the first images for me were this image just towards the end of the film, where they're all dancing in these circular formations. I thought that was something that I was itching to recreate, just seeing these hundreds of men and women in these kind of symmetrical circular shapes, and something about that was really incredible to me. I think it was, for me, almost like a replacement for the sexual energy had to be put somewhere. Most human beings are sexual. I wanted those, especially those early movement pieces, to feel almost like a sexual release, euphoric, orgasmic. Is what was my thought. And I wanted the camera to be not just hang back and observe them, but to really be swept into the movement and carefully choreographed. As much as the dancers and performers were choreographed, the camera needed to be inside of the movement and really be pulled into it. And so that you could hopefully, as an audience member, be swept into the ecstasy of the moment. Duality and the complexity of any marriage and relationship. I didn't want to say, oh, she hated sex, so it seemed too easy. And I wanted to be able to go on this journey with her. What I knew about her is that she got married, she had 4 children, they all died at a very young age or in childbirth. That's what we know about her. We know that she had a complete psychotic break and was hospitalized afterwards, and out of that came a revelation. So yes, I had to fill in the blanks in between. There's some anecdotes which they say that says that she really loved him, really cared for him. There's others that say that he was a brute and didn't understand her. It seemed complex to me. So I thought, you know what, this is a story about someone who renounced sexuality and sex. I think I need it to be complicated, and it definitely needs to be part of the story. And Amanda agreed with me on that as well, and so did Christopher Abbott. So we wanted to bring in not just showing childbirth in the most graphic way possible, in the most realistic way possible. That was important to us, to really create great prosthetics and use real babies and really great dummies and umbilical cords that could bleed and have all the blood and the breast milk and the sexuality all to be part of it, because it must have been a really complex journey. So I wanted to bring in that complexity and to say that there is probably a lot of love here, but there's also this isn't the right way into her sexuality, but it had to be part of it. To exclude it felt like a cop-out. It needed to be part of the material of the story, but it couldn't be black and white. Well, there's not a lot of references. There's very few, even now there's very few female leaders, let alone religious leaders, because she was called Mother Anne, and she lost her children, and then she said, you know what, I cannot mother my actual children. I'm going to go and I'm going to mother the whole goddamn world. And I'm going to lead from this place of mothering. And I thought that is a very interesting idea of a leader, especially now that the world is mostly led by men who's leading from a place of intimidation and fear. So I thought, okay, let's think about what is a leader as a mother. And that is a leader without ego. It's a leader who is really nurturing and who gives space for people to be creative and to bring their ideas, and who leads from a place of just unconditional just love, unless you are not celibate. But well, still love, but you know, it's that's the only problem. But no, I think that was really our thought around it. So it was not less about modeling it on any other sort of description or idea of a leader. It was more about really thinking about myself as a mother, Amanda thinking about herself as a mother. I said, you don't have to imitate any of these other ideas around leaders. Let's think about something completely new. Because I think that's what she was trying to do, Anne-Lee. Her social experiment was something completely new. And I think her ideas around also, you know, her denying sexuality and her ideas around celibacy, to me, it's too simple to say, oh, she had trauma, so she swore off sex. I think imposing it on others came from a place of saying the only way that we can achieve equality between gender is by saying there are no more husbands and wives because they're not equal. Wives were considered their husband's properties at the time. So, and a lot of men would value maybe a horse more than their wife. You know, it was easier to replace the wife than the horse. That's where you were coming from. So for her saying, okay, we're not husbands and wives, they don't exist anymore. We're brothers and sisters, and that's how we can be all equal. Removing marriage and removing sexuality and removing want for power, for property, for money, for anything, all of a sudden, you know, you could achieve equality. There's only 3 left, huh? So it didn't really work. So I'm not saying, hey, come, let's join the Shakers. I think all organized religion is really complicated, and I'm not part of any religion. You know, I'm not religious at all. If you look at it as a portrait of its time in dialogue with now, it's interesting. If you look at America, especially right now, and to remember that we had radical feminist historical figures, even in American history as well, because I think it's dangerous to erase them all from history. And I think that's what's been happening so much, especially with women who are not interested in creating a legacy about themselves. For Anne-Lee, it wasn't about that. It was only about the community that she's creating. And that's apparently something that's quite symptomatic for a lot of female leaders, is that it's about the community, and it's not so much about, you know, raise a statue in the square about me, you know. It's not about her ego, and it was never important. She was almost making herself almost disappear and invisible towards the end. Right now, looking at those ideas around socialism, you know, even how they would provide societal structures back then it was one of the first group to provide shelter for abused women, care for elder, adopting and caring for orphans. So those social structures that didn't exist at the time, they were, and one of the reasons why they dwindled was because the society started offering some of those services. So I think now, when again, we are losing those sort of societal structures also in America more and more, I think looking at them and seeing this parallel is important. Oh, I don't think I ever needed to be awoken. I was raised by, my mom back in Norway. She worked in women's rights throughout my childhood. She was, before she became an author, she was a lawyer, and she really worked hard on spearheading a lot of the laws around childbirth and maternity and paternity leave in Norway. And so I was raised in such a feminist household that I always thought how wonderful it is to be a woman. I was very proud to be a woman growing up, and I don't think I really encountered like full-on misogyny until I moved to America, honestly. And I was so surprised. I thought, what? Like, this is archaic. And so that was naive of me. But I watched a lot of films growing up. I think in terms of female directors that inspired me, I grew up, loving Claire Denis. I think her work always inspired me. I think Lucretia Martel is an incredible female filmmaker as well, that I always just enjoy her work so much. I think Anne Carson is a fantastic feminist writer who I love reading and turn to. I think they all share a logic that feels really driven by intuition, and maybe that's something that's like inherently feminine, although there's great male directors and writers who also adhere to the same sort of logic. I think the best pieces of art that I gravitate towards the most are films, books that feels truly like a dream, that has a very specific logic, but it is a dream logic. It's not a, a straightforward Hollywood idea. So I think that's, a place where I like to live, and that's really what inspires me.
Thank you very much.
Sure.